October 22, 2013, at Danvers High School in Massachusetts, the school day began as any other. Colleen Ritzer, a 24-year-old teacher, was known for her warm personality, and her students adored her. That afternoon, she stayed after school to help students who needed extra support with their math assignments. Among them was Philip Chisholm, a new student who had recently transferred to the school. At some point, Colleen left her classroom and walked toward the restroom. CCTV footage shows her moving down the hallway. A few minutes later, Philip is seen exiting the classroom. The footage captures him pausing outside the doorway, scanning the hallway to check if no one is watching. He hesitates briefly and then turns back into the classroom. Moments later, Philip exits the classroom again with a hood pulled over his head and walks toward the restroom where Colleen had gone just minutes earlier. Using a box cutter, Philip killed Colleen and did the unthinkable with her body. Philip was seen leaving the bathroom and returning moments later with a large recycling bin. He placed Colleen's lifeless body inside the bin and wheeled it through the halls of the school. The cameras tracked Philip as he wheeled the bin out of the school and into the woods behind the campus. Once he reached the secluded area, he dumped Colleen's body and attempted to conceal it with leaves and debris. After disposing of Colleen's body, he returned to the school and changed his clothes. Police tracked down Philip later that night. He was found walking along a highway carrying a backpack that contained the box cutter he had used to kill Colleen, as well as a pair of her credit cards. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Earlier in 2024, Chisholm pleaded guilty to a very similar assault he committed less than a year after he was taken into custody. Chisholm, who is now 25, pleaded guilty to charges including attempted murder, assault, and battery with a dangerous weapon and kidnapping after a Massachusetts Department of Youth Services worker accused him of attacking her in June 2014 in a similar manner to the way he attacked Ritzer the October prior. The 29-year-old worker said Chisholm followed her into a bathroom and pinned her against a wall while trying to strangle her and attack her with a pencil. Chisholm was sentenced to 17 to 20 more years in prison as a result of the second attack. October 31st, 2013. Inside a cell in Ontario's Elgin Middlesex Detention Centre, Anthony George, a 32-year-old inmate, brutally killed his cellmate, 29-year-old Adam Cargus. Anthony had already displayed violent tendencies, and his relationship with Adam was far from stable. CCTV footage shows that he had put Adam in a chokehold that same day and threatened him. Yet, despite these red flags, the two were housed in the same cell. When the nurse at the jail was doing her rounds with another guard to deliver inmates medication, she reported the strong smell of alcohol inside the two men's cell. It was reported to the control room, where it was noted on a whiteboard that in cell 3, there was a possible brew, which is prison slang for a makeshift fermented beverage created by inmates. Anthony was intoxicated, drunk on a concoction of jailhouse alcohol and reportedly a cigarette laced with PCP. How he obtained the drugs remains unclear, but the combination of substances, coupled with his aggressive behavior, created a deadly scenario. The assault began late at night. CCTV footage from the detention center captured glimpses of the violence. For over an hour, Anthony repeatedly attacked Adam in their shared cell. No guards intervened, and the attack went unchecked. Some of the inmates in nearby cells witnessed what was happening. Surveillance cameras captured an inmate raising a handmade sign in his cell window, quietly trying to get the attention of officers. The sign read, "Cell 3 911. The guards, however, didn't respond. By the time Anthony finished his attack, Adam was dead. His body remained in the cell with Anthony until the next morning. At that point, Anthony decided to move Adam's body. Once again, CCTV captured what happened next. In the early hours, Anthony dragged Adam's lifeless body across the floor, out of the cell, and toward the shower area. It wasn't until later that Adam's body was discovered in the shower area. By then, Anthony had even asked for the help of other inmates to clean up the blood in the cell, trying to cover up what had happened. Two of these inmates faced consequences later for assisting him in moving the body and attempting to erase evidence. Cargus was found with numerous injuries around his head and body, as well as stab wounds to his upper body. At the time of his death, Cargus was serving a 90-day sentence for fraud. 6 staff members at the detention center were fired for failing to act. The fact that guards didn't intervene during the hour-long attack or noticed the body being dragged through the jail raised serious questions. Anthony George was sentenced to life in jail. On the morning of February 1st, 2021, a snowstorm had covered Plains Township, Pennsylvania. Neighbors were outside shoveling snow. Among them were James and Lisa Goy, a married couple in their late 40s. The couple was clearing their driveway by tossing snow across the street onto their neighbor, Jeffrey Spade's property. James and Lisa Goy had a tense relationship with Spade. Neighbors said it had been ongoing for years, stemming from petty disputes about noise, boundaries, and so on. Spade noticed the snow piling up on his property and came outside to confront the Goys. The CCTV footage shows James and Lisa standing in the middle of the street, yelling at Spade, who remained near his house. Lisa shouted insults across the street. James joined in, hurling threats. Witnesses described the Goys as taunting Spade, mocking him, and daring him to respond.
Dummy mother. Jesus
Whoa,
Christ.
Whoa, you?
Oh, me? Yeah.
You?
Put the shovel down.
You know what?
Go ahead.
Look it, you know what? This is bull.
Call me a
We have
scummy
been-
mother. I'll knock your goddamn head off. Call me a scummy mother. Step out here. I'll knock your ass out. I'll make your life a living hell living here. What? You heard me. Fuck you fucking scum. You would probably.
You're the scumbag. You mother is so fun.
The situation quickly spiraled. Moments later, Spade turned and walked into his house, leaving the Goys yelling in the street. When Spade reappeared, he was holding a handgun. James and Lisa continued yelling at Spade, daring him to do something.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Without hesitation, Spade raised the gun and fired. James was hit first and fell to the ground. Lisa screamed but stayed where she was. She too was struck moments later. Despite their injuries, both continued to shout. James tried to crawl to safety, but didn't get far. Spade fired again, ensuring they couldn't recover. After shooting them multiple times, Spade walked back into his house, leaving James and Lisa bleeding in the street. Neighbors began calling 911. Spade came back outside, this time holding a rifle. He walked toward the injured couple and, without hesitation, he fired at close range, killing both James and Lisa instantly. Then he turned and walked back into his home. When police arrived, they found James and Lisa's bodies lying in the snow. Their teenage son, who had been inside their house during the shooting, was unharmed. Spade, meanwhile, had retreated inside his home and used the rifle to take his own life before officers could intervene. Jeffrey Spade was allegedly seen pacing inside of his home before the final shot was heard. Jeffrey Spade, 47, had a reputation for being a quiet and private man. He was a Navy veteran and worked as a civil engineer. Those who knew him described him as reserved, someone who avoided drama. Yet the years of tension with the Goys had clearly worn him down. Witnesses speculated that the feud, combined with the stress of the pandemic, had pushed him past his breaking point. James and Lisa Goy were remembered as outspoken and unafraid of confrontation. They had a strong presence in the neighborhood and were deeply devoted to their teenage son. It was February 14th, 2017, Valentine's Day. Ellie Tran's focus was on her daughter and family. She was a devoted single mother, working as a manicurist to support her 2-year-old child and her aging parents, who had moved from Vietnam to help raise their granddaughter. Ellie was in a relationship with Joseph Merlino III. The couple had dated for a few years, and Ellie became pregnant with their daughter. However, what should have been a happy milestone quickly turned toxic. Joseph, the 29-year-old owner of a phone repair business, was controlling and violent. When Joseph grabbed her by the neck and threatened to quote-unquote put her under the ground, Ellie finally ended the relationship. After the breakup, Joseph's controlling behavior didn't stop. He harassed Ellie, attempted to break into her home, and followed her obsessively. One day he disguised himself as a woman and threw acid on her, but she wasn't critically hurt. Ellie installed surveillance cameras around her property, specifically for Joseph. That Valentine's evening, Ellie returned home from work, pulling into her driveway around 8 p.m. As she stepped out of her car, Joseph ambushed her. In his hand was a syringe filled with cyanide, a lethal poison capable of killing within minutes. Joseph chased Ellie and plunged the syringe into Ellie's leg. As Ellie screamed, her mother ran outside to find her daughter in pain. Ellie pointed in the direction of the man fleeing. She told her mother it was Joseph. In her final moments of consciousness, Ellie managed to dial 911, but within 15 minutes, she was unconscious. She was rushed to the hospital, where doctors desperately tried to save her. By midnight, Ellie was declared brain dead, and the following day, her family made the decision to remove her from life support. Joseph Merlino III became the immediate suspect. Ellie's mother identified him as the attacker, but the surveillance footage was inconclusive due to the poor lighting and the attacker's disguise. Joseph had been planning his alibi. He claimed to have been over 100 miles away in Victoria, Virginia, visiting family at the time of the attack. His cell phone data appeared to support this claim, showing it was in Victoria that evening. It was possible someone else had possession of the device, placing Joseph's alibi in doubt. The owner of a pizza place Joseph often visited recalled receiving a mysterious package addressed to Joseph in January 2017. When the owner informed Joseph of its arrival, he quickly retrieved the package and left. Police tracked the sender, a woman in New Hampshire who had sold a syringe on Etsy. On Joseph's laptop, investigators found internet searches conducted in the weeks leading up to Valentine's Day. These included high-quality syringes, how much cyanide does it take to kill someone, and what happens if cyanide gets into the bloodstream. Joseph had a one-way flight booked to China, where his new girlfriend lived. It appeared he had intended to flee the country after carrying out the crime, but police arrested him before he could leave. While awaiting trial, he went on a 2-month hunger strike, losing over 40 pounds. Many believed that he was trying to alter his appearance to make it harder for witnesses to identify him as the man in the surveillance footage. Joseph stood trial for Ellie's murder. Joseph's defense maintained his innocence, arguing he was over 100 miles away at the time of the murder. But the evidence was overwhelming. After deliberating, the jury found Joseph guilty of first-degree murder and recommended a life sentence. At his sentencing in December 2018, Joseph continued to disrupt proceedings. He arrived in court in some type of wheelchair, covered in a blanket, foaming at the mouth, and rocking back and forth. A prison doctor suggested he might be suffering from a stress-induced mental condition. Prosecutors, however, accused him of faking the episode to delay sentencing. The judge postponed the hearing, but a week later, Joseph returned to court and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the early hours of April 15, 2013, 23-year-old Fiona Anderson was captured on CCTV walking through the streets of Lowestoft, England, carrying a teddy bear in her hands. She had just taken the lives of her 3 children and was moments away from ending her own. Fiona Anderson was a young mother of 3 children, Lavina, age 3, Addie, age 2, and Kaiden, only 11 months old. By all accounts, she loved her children deeply and devoted herself to raising them. Friends and family described her as caring and attentive, always putting her children first. Fiona had recently separated from her children's father, and the relationship had been turbulent. Fiona struggled as a single mother, managing the challenges of raising 3 small children while grappling with her own mental health issues. The event that seemed to push Fiona to her breaking point was learning that her ex-partner had begun a new relationship. This news devastated her, worsening the feelings of rejection, abandonment, and fear she was already experiencing. Reports suggest that Fiona had become increasingly paranoid about losing custody of her children, which added to her already fragile mental state. Mental health professionals later speculated that she was suffering from severe depression or possibly postpartum psychosis, a rare but dangerous condition that can distort a mother's perception of reality. These conditions can cause a person to believe their children are better off dead than living in a world they see as cruel or unforgiving. While this may help explain her actions, it does not make them any less tragic. Fiona spent the day at home with her children. At some point during the day, she filled the bathtub and drowned all 3 of her children. After they died, Fiona placed lipstick kisses on each of their foreheads. On their stomachs, she wrote the words, "Love you," as a final expression of her affection. Around the room, she wrote other messages on the walls. One of the messages read, "They're cuddled up together sleeping. They look so peaceful." To those who later investigated the scene, these details show just how deeply conflicted Fiona had been. She didn't see herself as a killer, but as a mother, trying to save her children from what she believed was an unbearable future. After the deaths of her children, Fiona left the house. CCTV cameras recorded her at her ex Craig's apartment before walking through the quiet streets of Lowestoft for 90 minutes with a teddy bear in her hands. Those who saw the footage later described her as looking ghost-like, detached from her surroundings, as though the weight of her actions had already taken her soul. Shortly after the CCTV footage was taken, Fiona made her way to the top of a multi-story car park. Witnesses reported seeing her stand on the edge of the building for several minutes, holding the teddy bear. Then, without hesitation, she jumped. Fiona died instantly, but it wasn't until later that authorities learned she was 7 months pregnant at the time of her death. This meant that 5 lives were lost in the tragedy. She had also written the names of each child on her own body, along with the name Eve, which she intended to name her unborn daughter. Chief Inspector Smith said the day before the killings, she had argued with the children's father, Craig McClelland, after he began a new relationship and stabbed him during this confrontation. But he initially lied to police to protect her and the children and said he had been stabbed in the street by a stranger. At some point, Fiona texted Craig, "Say goodnight to the children as it's the last time you'll see them." Inspector Smith added that a torn-up letter recovered after her death provided a harrowing insight into her life. She felt unable to cope with the situation and apologetically outlined her intention to take her children with her. In her own words, "A mother never abandons her children." The story begins on February 12, 1993, at the New Strand shopping centre in Bootle, England. Denise Bulger had taken her son James on a trip to the shopping centre. She was holding his hand as they moved through the crowd. At one point, she let go of his hand for just a moment to pay for items at a butcher's shop. While Denise was distracted, 2 10-year-old boys, Robert Thompson and John Venables, were wandering the mall unsupervised. Earlier that day, they had been spotted stealing items from stores and trying to lure other children away from their parents. By the time they encountered James, they had tried to abduct another child but failed. The CCTV footage from that day shows James being led away from the butcher's shop by Robert and John. At first glance, it appears innocent. 2 older boys walking hand in hand with a younger child. The boys led James out of the shopping centre and onto a long journey across Liverpool. Witnesses reported seeing James with the 2 boys, but no one intervened. In part, this was because the boys acted as though they were helping a lost child, reassuring passers-by who questioned them. As the trio made their way through the city, their actions became increasingly cruel. They took James to a secluded area where they hit him, threw paint in his eyes, and kicked him repeatedly, along with other things that I can't discuss on YouTube. At one point, they even dropped him on his head. The boys showed no signs of stopping. The 2 then led James to a railway track in Walton, Liverpool. There, they escalated their violence, using an iron bar to beat him severely. James suffered multiple skull fractures, among other injuries. To conceal what they had done, the boys placed James's lifeless body on the tracks and covered it with stones and rubble. Their intention was to make it appear as though James had been struck by a train. Tragically, a train did pass over his body, but by then, James was already dead. It was unthinkable that anyone, let alone 2 10-year-olds, could commit such a brutal crime. The investigation quickly turned to the CCTV footage from the shopping centre. Once the footage was released, it didn't take long for the boys to be identified and arrested.
I told him to take him back.
You did what?
I told him to take him back.
You told him to take it back? All right, Bobby. I know the truth. I believe I know the truth.
I was there.
That's right.
You waved.
Correct, but I know that a lot of things that have gone on.
Yeah, well, do you know what you mean that killed him? It wasn't. I never even killed him.
Was he able to talk?
Yeah.
James?
Yeah.
What did he say to you?
You want me now? So we walked up to him and we were walking around with him and I took his hand.
And whose idea was it to walk towards him?
Mine.
Was it?
Then it was Robert's idea to kill him. Don't know, he said let's throw him in the water. We took him on the rail shop and started throwing bricks at him. I didn't throw any bricks because Robert said pick a brick up and throw it. I just threw it on the floor.
What was Robert saying while he was doing all this?
He was saying stay down, stupid thing and all that.
Why did he want him to stay down?
I don't know. He wanted him dead, probably.
Robert Thompson and John Venables were charged with James's murder, making them the youngest individuals in modern British history to be convicted of such a crime. During the trial, the prosecution painted a disturbing picture of premeditation. The boys had skipped school that day, roamed the shopping center looking for a victim, and deliberately led James to his death. The defense argued that the boys were too young to fully comprehend the consequences of their actions, but the evidence was overwhelming. Both boys were found guilty and sentenced to be detained indefinitely, with the judge describing their actions as unparalleled evil. However, because of their age, they were not sent to adult prisons. Instead, they were placed in secure children's homes, where they received education and therapy. The case did not end there. In 2001, Robert Thompson and John Venables were released from custody at the age of 18 and given new identities to protect them from public retribution. John Venables in particular has struggled to stay out of the public eye. He has been arrested multiple times for offences including possession of CP. In the late 2000s, in Bradford, West Yorkshire, England, Stephen Griffiths, a man who would later infamously call himself the Crossbow Cnibal, was carrying out acts so gruesome that even hardened investigators were left terrified. Born in Dewsbury, West Yorkshire, his criminal record began as a teenager with shoplifting, but it quickly escalated. At just 17 years old, he slashed a supermarket manager across the face with a knife. For this, Griffiths was sentenced to 3 years in prison. While behind bars, Griffiths fantasized about becoming a serial killer. By the late 1990s, Stephen's behavior only became stranger. He attempted relationships but sabotaged them with disturbing actions. In one case, a girlfriend ended things after visiting his flat and noticing that he had covered all the surfaces with plastic sheeting. Another girlfriend suffered years of stalking and harassment after leaving him. He was often seen parading around Bradford with 2 giant lizards on leashes. On one occasion, he reportedly ate a live baby rat in front of a friend. 5 years after his release, he was jailed again for holding a knife to a young girl's throat. Over the years, his fascination with serial killers grew, with Griffiths idolizing murderers like Jack the Ripper and the Yorkshire Ripper. By 2009, Griffiths had enrolled in a criminology master's program at Bradford University, immersing himself in his obsession. It was during that same year, in June 2009, that Griffiths began his killing spree. His first victim was 43-year-old Susan Rushworth, a sex worker well known in the Bradford area. Susan disappeared without a trace. Less than a year later, in April 2010, 36-year-old Shelley Armitage also vanished. And just weeks after Shelley's disappearance, another 36-year-old sex worker, Suzanne Blemires, was reported missing. Griffiths had lured all 3 women back to his flat in Bradford. Susan Rushworth, the first victim, was shot with a crossbow before Griffiths dismembered her body in his bathtub. To this day, none of Susan's remains have been recovered. Shelley Armitage was his next victim. Her body, like Susan's, was dismembered and disposed of. Griffiths' final victim, Suzanne Blemires, tried to escape. After being lured to his flat, she made a desperate run for her life, fleeing down the hallway. But Griffiths, armed with a crossbow, shot her in the head as she ran. After killing Suzanne, he turned to the CCTV camera in his building, raised his middle finger, and smirked while holding the weapon used to end her life. Griffiths had been careful to cover his tracks, but his arrogance led to his arrest. The caretaker of his building, reviewing the CCTV footage, discovered the clip of Griffiths shooting Suzanne and later taunting the camera. The police were alerted and Griffiths was arrested in May 2010. When questioned by police, Griffiths didn't just admit to the murders, he seemed to take pride in his crimes. In court, he gave his name as the Crossbow Cnibal and claimed he had eaten parts of his victims. He told detectives that consuming Suzanne's flesh was quote-unquote part of the magic. Griffiths also hinted at other murders, stating, "I've killed a lot more than Suzanne Blemires. I've killed loads." However, no evidence has been found to support these claims. Griffiths was handed a whole life order, ensuring he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. The court also heard that Griffiths possessed a collection of disturbing videos and images. Since his incarceration, he has reportedly attempted to take his own life multiple times. That was the video. If you want more similar content, you can check out this video that YouTube thinks you will enjoy. Thank you for watching.